the review situation is a little weird thanks to Apple Podcasts. So maybe we'll get a review to read during the middle of the episode, or maybe we'll put it at the beginning. But we're just going to have to start this episode. I really don't think that now is the time for small talk, which is normally what we do at the beginning of our episodes. So I think we're just going to get right into it. Welcome to, I guess, what is this, an emergency housekeeping episode, if you even want to call it that, presented by the Politipop podcast, the podcast where we read between the lines of our favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. Not just that, though. We usually review current events and kind of, try to give our takes on different things that are happening in our world and in our country. And also, while we listen to podcasts that update us on different things and we have access to different media, maybe, the people listening out there don't have access to that stuff. As in, like, maybe this is the only podcast you listen to because, one of your friends told you to, or I made you listen to it or something. So, I do think that we do have a responsibility to just inform as well as best we can. And, as always, we are not experts on things, but we do have a show notes and sources page at the politipoppodcast.wordpress.com. And you can find our show notes and sources there. So if you're ever like, all right, where are they getting this information from? That would be the place to do it. And if ever we do have like theories that are unfounded, we will always say that as well. This is just a gut feeling. This is what I'm gleaning from this. This is unfounded. We'll always do that. But that being said, we are going to interrupt our Bat Month episodes. I mean, there's no Bat Month this month anyway. It's completely fake.
It's our Bat Month.
It's our Bat Month, meaning we can interrupt it if we want. And we are going to be discussing the situation with Palestine. And I am your co-host, Mike Booch. And as always, in my second seat is my lovely co-host, Ty.
Yeah, I'm here too.
All right, so you've probably been hearing a lot of different things, or unfortunately, you've probably been hearing a lot of the same things from various sources because, it turns out that we do operate on state-run media here. And I know I sound like a silly little lib for, just realizing that, but we all have our wake-up moments, I guess, and I've really been trying to stay off social media and concentrate more on myself and bettering myself as a person and as whatever thing I decide to do that week. But I've been on Reddit a lot, and it's all over there. Like all of the genocide that's happening in Palestine, I'll call it what it is, and hopefully that doesn't turn some of you off, because if you sit through this entire episode, I'm not sure it'll be too long, I'm gonna justify everything I say, and we'll go from there. But yeah, so Ty, with your permission, I would like to give a brief, hopefully, and broad history lesson in order to set some context.
Right. Permission denied.
Okay, great. How do you want to start?
No, I joke. Gotta have a little bit of humor. Go ahead, give a history lesson.
Permission denied. I would instead like you to start with a brief and broad, or broad and brief, whichever the opposite I said was, history. So I'm going to do my best with the years here. And once again, all of the places where I'm getting this information from will be in our show notes and sources this week. Which means that those of you who are waiting for the Batman Begins and White Knight sources, those will be up as well. Because I always do it in order, and I've been slacking on those. But here we go. There was a Jewish writer who pretty much created Zionism, or created the theory that led to Zionism, and I think that's an important definition to make at the beginning of this. And basically he said that Jews were at a point in their lives where they shouldn't bother conforming with Europeans, and that they should settle in their own state. And at that time, it was just a theory when he came up with it. The Ottoman Empire and a bunch of other nations were still vying for different lands and stuff. At the time, most secular Jews imagined this Zion to be more of a state for Jews and less of a Jewish state, which is a very important distinction to make, because one of those sounds like a great idea and the other is, I guess, I don't know. It's just imperialist. But here we go. So as we know, when we go back into American history, Britain is always the problem. They always want to colonize everything and expand their empire as much as possible. In 1917, just before World War I ended, they established something known as the Balfour Declaration, which established Palestine as a land for the Jews. And they were promising this land to a lot of different people. They were promising Arabic land to themselves, to the Jews, and to the Meccans. After World War I, the British established a colony in Palestine, and they intentionally separated the faiths so they could better control them, better divide them and rule them. They did kind of what we're always doing in the Middle East, which is, we're going to be here and help you get back on your feet, and then our troops will leave when you can take care and govern yourselves and be safe.
Yeah, we're providing structure and safety.
Yes, but of course, when the Palestinians were like, hey, maybe you should leave, they were like, I think we need to stay for a little while. So by 1938, Jews were just under 30% of the Palestinian population, and Palestinian obviously meaning like that area. The British began the process of evicting Arab Palestinians to make way for Jewish settlers, and then used Jewish militias to help fight a Palestinian revolt against the British. So when their land was being cleared, Palestinians revolted against the British, and of course these militias were like, all right, we're going to fight so that way we have a place to live. We don't have we don't have a nation, and so they helped the British quash this rebellion, and then the British rewarded them by limiting Jewish immigration. And then they tried to force a Jewish-Palestinian state within 10 years, which none of that really worked out well. And this kind of rings, this has echoes to me of what happened with North America being colonized, where, there were indigenous peoples who were pitted against each other, and then there were treaties that were signed that always got broken by the United States, and these indigenous people who were under some agreement now have nowhere to go except to move, and this seems to be right in the same vein. So eventually the British let the UN take care of Palestine because they figured at this point that colony was was more trouble than it was worth. So they let the UN take care of it just after World War II. So now we have 1947 is officially when Israel is created. And, my wife was surprised by this, and I was surprised by this. I really shouldn't have been, but, here I am learning things as an adult that I should have learned when I was younger. And Israel's 73 years old. It's like a really new state.
Very new.
Very new. And, another new state or country is also the United States. A lot of people don't realize how new we are, and yet we became a superpower so fast. And once again, the way you become a superpower that fast is on the broken bodies of people, whether it be through war or forced labor, enslavement, whatever it is. And, of course, settler colonialism. So Israel's created, and the UN wants to give Israel a significant amount of Palestinian land, and this is when the Arab-Israeli war starts. And this is important because technically it was started by the Arab nations against Israel. And this takes me back to what used to be one of my go-to movies when I wanted to laugh. It was Adam Sandler's "You Don't Mess with the Zohan," and it was very in poor taste then, and it's in worse taste now, I feel. But Adam Sandler decided to use comedy and cosmetics in order to tackle the Palestine Israel. I don't want to call it a conflict situation issue. Once again, genocide. And he's talking to this woman. Adam Sandler plays, a former IOF, or IDF if you're on their side, agent, and he wants to become a civilian. He's talking to this, this woman. I believe she's of Arabic descent, and he says, your people started it first. So I believe this is what he's referencing. When the Arab-Israeli war started, it was the Arab nations against Israel. Israel wins. Wild how, after being so new, they had all of these resources and support to win. So, and that doesn't really change up until today. So Israel wins, and when they do, they not only take the land that they were promised by the UN, but they take a third more than that. And they continue a long campaign of taking Palestinian land when they want, how they want, and they even end up taking control of the holy city of Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem is a holy site for all of the major religions, okay? There's also a Christian area, which a lot of Christians aren't, Jerusalem is currently controlled by Israel, and they are limiting who can practice their faiths there. So it's not just Muslims they're oppressing, they're also oppressing, local Christians, probably Arab Christians. Like the U.S. being formed, we see lots of treaties being broken, and we see using people with less power against each other. So I mentioned that earlier. Then after that, Jordan takes control of West Bank, and Egypt takes Gaza. So Palestine has even less land left. In 1967, we had the 6 Days War between the Arab nations and Israel, in which Israel gains control of the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights. The UN then passed a resolution with framework for Israel to withdraw from the territory they acquired in the war, and that saying that Palestine and Israel both have to acknowledge each other as states. Didn't happen. The war continues to get more heated. International law continues to say that settlements are illegal, but Israel doesn't really acknowledge Palestine, so they don't care. They say that these settlements are our land by right anyway, so who cares? Now, shortly after this, we see the first Intifada from Palestine, which literally translates to shaking off. They're fighting back, they're resisting, and some of their resistance includes boycotts and the refusal to pay taxes. But Israel continues to crack down. This was some of the first instances, but since then they've continued to crack down on any form of protests. Once again, similar to how the U.S. does it. And then we have Hamas. Which was Hamas.
I've heard of Hamas. They're the terrorist group.
Exactly, yes. According to everything we've seen, they are the terrorist group. And even mentioning the word seems dirty in my mouth because, I still have all of that indoctrination. Since 11 years old, I've been led to believe through all popular media and through the quote unquote news that Arabic people are all terrorists. And it really is such a convenient narrative because every time there's the conflict, and I use that word very loosely, but for lack of better ones right now, is ongoing. Yet, anytime it makes its way into the public sphere, Hamas is there to be the scapegoat. But
I for a minute I did think you were going to say that since 11 years old you were taught to hate Hamas, and I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that the hatred went that deep for you.
I think it was 1987 Hamas came about, so for some reason. But yeah, I'm really fighting that programming. No, but Hamas, they're the quote unquote terrorist group, and I'm gonna explain why that's quote unquote right now. That popularized the suicide bomb. In their charter, according to some articles I found, and I will include their full charter in the show notes, there's both a version that was translated by Israeli academics and a version that is from a Middle Eastern website itself. So I'm going to put both of those in the show notes. That way you can compare the text yourselves there. But Hamas's charter obviously stated that they would be willing to fight back against Israeli military occupation. But a lot of people don't also know that when they started, they were known for their social welfare projects that built and staffed schools, mosques, and provided food. Now, if we're making the American comparison here, there's another terrorist resistance group in the United States that had social welfare programs that are, once again, labeled as violent terrorists. Ty, you with the hand up in the back, does that ring a bell to you? Can you tell me who we spoke about recently that sounds like that?
Geez, there's so many groups like that. I guess if I had to take a guess, I'd say the Black Panthers.
That is an excellent guess, Ty, and that's why you get a gold star today.
Yes.
That is a distinction that I have created. I did not find that anywhere else, but it's just difficult because so much media literally says they're terrorists, they're terrorists, they're terrorists, they're terrorists. So later on, when they end up getting voted into office, and taking the majority of parliamentary seats in Palestine, it's easy for people to say, well, they voted a terrorist group in, but yeah, they've also voted in a resistance group. And, once again, like I said, they popularized the suicide bomb. Hamas, like I said, is a scapegoat that when they are fighting back against Israeli oppression or protesting, or, maybe there's a protest that's squashed by the IOF, by the Israeli occupation forces. And then, when they respond with force, the Hamas will come out, and then the media always, comes in and says, wait, Israel's responding to Hamas's aggression. But that just happened last week, and we're going to get up to that, very, very, very soon. But anyway, that's kind of the whole, there's always this ongoing struggle between the two, quote unquote, two sides, quote unquote, struggle. I'll also include a Hamas documentary, which even in this documentary, is, I think, told from a very specific Hamas is bad perspective. And yet they still can't help but acknowledge all of the oppression that they faced that created Hamas. So I find that very interesting. So then we have our boy Bill Clinton. He proposed peace talks between Palestine and Israel. Ehud Barak, he was the Israeli prime minister at the time. He was actually willing to give up more land than any prime minister before him. And this even surprised Arafat. But anyway, those peace talks failed, and nothing came of them. Then in 2000, we have a Israeli prime minister candidate who marches to Al-Aqsa with 1,000 armed troops. Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest site in Islam, and Israel has continually used it as a bargaining chip to either keep Palestine at bay, or they'll use it to punish them. And this was one of those cases. It led to the second Intifada, in which 3,000 Palestinians died, 1,000 Israelis died. Once again, it's so weird that this terrorist nation of Palestine and Hamas, they continue to attack Israel, and they always lose, and then keep doing it. Something doesn't make sense. Why would this maybe the narrative we're getting isn't 100% correct. Maybe it's not even 50% correct. Maybe this terrorist group is actually a resistance force just trying to fucking show their teeth and keep the beast at bay.
Whoa.
Yeah. So here we have 2002. It might be, get out of the kitchen if you can't handle it, folks. So then we have 2002 after the second Intifada, in which Israel constructs a wall for quote unquote self-defense, and we're going to use that term a lot this episode. And this wall includes a lot of settler land, and not just the land that was seized after the 6-Day War. So they're taking more Palestinian land. Granted, there are Israeli settlers living on it. They say, we got to protect our own. Yet they're officially blocking off Palestinian land from Palestinians. Later on in the mid-2000s, we see that Hamas actually wins the majority of parliamentary seats. And also governing has not gone well between them and the other party, Fatah, which was Arafat's party. Things just aren't going well, and I think a big part of that also is just because of the lack of resources that Palestine has. I didn't mention it yet, but Israel controls the borders of Palestine. They control their food. They call it, quote unquote, putting them on a diet. Really great. They control the construction materials that come in, which means no construction materials come in. So this third world country continues to become a fourth world country and a fifth world country every time it gets destroyed, and they can never build back. Also, their water is controlled, their gas is controlled, their electricity and other necessities are controlled. And I want to talk a little bit about Arafat real quick. I didn't mention much of him before, but he actually led a resistance force against Israel as well, known as the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO. And he failed. He didn't gain anything. And then in the end, he ended up acknowledging Israel. And Fatah agreed to hunt down Hamas. So his party, that was a resistance party, was then turned on Hamas by Israel. So once again, using these disenfranchised people against each other, breaking treaties, and then, giving one person breadcrumbs to kill their brother. And not only did he not gain anything from this, but he, recognizing Israel, gave up 79% of Palestine. So that was something that I think is important to mention. So Hamas wins the majority of parliament. You can look at the documentary. It's very interesting. It talks about how they've had to go from being resistance fighters to being like local police, and it puts them in a really awkward position because they don't know how to talk people down. They only know conflict. Sounding very familiar as well. Although this is in Palestine. And I'm gonna fast forward to where we are right now. Ramadan 2021. We see that Israel is evicting another neighborhood, and there are multiple neighborhoods, but the one that's been in the media a lot is Sheikh Jarrah. And there are protests that come from this. Palestinians are protesting, and in order to set the Palestinians straight, Israel decides to storm Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, once again, Al-Aqsa is the third holiest site in Islam. I believe they were stormed 4 times in 5 days, according to the article that I'll provide in the show notes. Or it might have been 5 times in 4 days, which is a little more tragic. So these are people during the height of Ramadan, during Eid, who are worshiping at their holy site. And I'm not even fucking religious at all. Like, I don't have skin in this game, and just the human rights violations are fucking triggering me right now. And there are people walking in with their fucking boots. I mean, it wouldn't have been better if they took their boots off and then brutalized these people, but who knows? So they walk in with their boots. They're throwing flashbangs. They're fucking, setting this mosque on fire. They are making it impossible for these people to worship. Once again, at the height, this is like a church getting attacked on Easter or Christmas or something. This is what that is. And once again, I don't know if any Christians have worshipped anything there in a while because Israel took control of Jerusalem. So Al-Aqsa gets stormed, and Hamas ends up attacking Israel. We hear popular, Hamas has rockets. Hamas sent the rockets, and all of a sudden, that's where American media picks up, and they pick up on Israel attacking Palestine, and they say, they're responding to aggression from Hamas. And, we're seeing a lot of civilian neighborhoods getting bombed again. We've seen aggression at the border in the past. You can look it up yourself if you want. Children throwing stones and still getting shot in the head by Israeli soldiers. It's terrible.
I mean, this whole thing is being framed as self-defense, though, right? And that's what the United States says it supports self-defense. And, Hamas is a terrorist organization, and they've caused this to happen. They're using people as human shields, and, Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. That's how it's being framed.
Now, one of the documentaries that you sent me, I'm not sure if it was the one on the BDS movement or if it was Gaza Fighting for Freedom, both of which are free and will also be available in the show notes and sources, because seriously, do not take it just from us. Please do your own research, because it's... I mean, don't stop at CNN, but like, seriously, check our notes and sources. But anyway, the weird thing to me is that people keep justifying this by saying, listen, they voted in a terrorist organization as their government. So isn't it just their government now? Like, instead of saying Hamas, launches rockets at Israel, wouldn't it be Palestine launches rockets? Israel, like it's technically, two governments. And once again, one of the sides of this quote unquote conflict is responding with disproportionate force, leveling entire neighborhoods, killing civilians, killing children, and always saying that their excuse is, Hamas hides behind civilians, Hamas hides behind children. So I guess with $3 billion a year of funding from the U.S. and all of the other resources we have from the rest of the world who's supporting us because they're afraid of being called anti-Semitic, we can't find a way to get these specific terrorists with all of our resources, so we just have to kill all the children in front of you. Whoops. And of course, we're seeing in the most recent, and the numbers continue to escalate, so I'm not going to try to get them, but the hundreds of Palestinians dead, tens of Israelis dead. And, what sucks is that the media is so biased that I'm not even sure if I can believe that, and I really wish I could. And I want to make my stance known here because there is the anti-Semitism argument. There is the whole, do you acknowledge Israel as a state and all this other stuff. This isn't about religion for me. I do believe that everybody should have a place to be. I don't believe that human rights have to be crushed in order to do it. I believe that, even if it ended with that first war, the Arab-Israeli war, in which they won, you don't have to continue destroying the lives of your neighbors. Like, they are also, not only are they pushing them off the land, but they're making it so there's nowhere to go. So therefore, they have nowhere to go. They just die. It is complete extinction. It is complete genocide. It is disgusting. And that's what I want to, that's one thing I want to say. I want to say that, there's a few myths that I'm going to, that, we should talk about. And one of them is the anti-Semitism myth. And it's, if you're against Israel, you are against the Jewish faith. And this
I think that's like, do you believe that Israel represents every Jewish person in the world? If Israel represents all Jews, right? If that's how you look at it, I guess you can make that argument, right? But there are Jews all over the world, right? Live in various countries and have, different political, beliefs and things like that. I just don't, I think it's such a broad thing. They call the United States a Christian nation, but if you're against the U.S., does that mean you're against all Christians? You know what I mean? Like, it's such a broad kind of, it's just such a broad stroke. And the whole situation is just so complicated. Like you already brought up the history, but, going back to World War II, the fact that, basically they went in and took land from Palestinians and just, kicked people out of their houses and gave it to the Israelis was really not the solution. You know what I mean? Because the Palestinians aren't the ones that committed the crimes.
And it wasn't the Brits' land in the first place to take. Like, once again, like, it is imperialism, and they'll come in, they'll fuck shit up, and then they'll go, all right, not our problem. And then they're out. And this conflict has been going on since then. Sorry,
the Jews, you could argue were there originally, right? But they were kicked out by the Romans. So, now you're doing the same thing to another group of people that happened to them. You're just repeating history, as they say. Instead of, countries like Germany, who actually, committed the atrocity of the Holocaust, instead of, giving them land and reparations and kind of, reintegrating them into the societies from which they actually had come, they gave them, all of this territory that the Palestinians were living in. And ever since, it's just set off this constant conflict, as you said, as the Palestinians get pushed further and further back, and they're basically in an open air prison, right? They're at a point where they have nowhere to go. They are surrounded at every border, on one side by Egypt, the other side by Israel. They're only allowed to go out to sea so far. They're not allowed to leave the country without permission from Israel, even if it's for emergency medical surgeries. The amount of food that is brought into the country is limited by the Israelis based on the lowest needed calorie intake that a person needs to survive. The amount of water that they're given is dictated by Israel, because I think 90% of their own water, the Palestinians, is toxic. So, the fact that their food and water is literally controlled by Israel means that they are not, they don't have any rights of their own. They basically are just being controlled and are subject to whatever Israel decides for them.
And that is not self-defense, folks. Like that is it. At a certain point, fine. If you want to even take that stance that, oh well, the Arabs started it, and just so you know, like there are a lot of terms we're throwing around here. Just so you know, like, I'm not saying all Arabs are Muslims. I'm not saying all Muslims are Arabs.
Right.
Not all Palestinians are Muslim even. There are Christian Palestinians who fought in the PLO, for Arafat. So I just want to say that. But even if you want to take that stance, right, self-defense only goes so far. And I have said multiple times that, I grew up in martial arts, and even my version of self-defense, which is very, very extreme. How it takes a lot to push me to that point. And luckily I've never gone there, but I have been taught that if somebody is physically threatening you or a loved one, that you put them out of commission, and it could be, punch them in the throat, breaking their arm, breaking their wrist, fucking, you throwing sand in their eyes, whatever. The point is, they're not fighting you back. They're not fighting back at you anymore. But even that is so extreme, but when you beat that person up who pushed you and then find their wife and punch them and then find their kid, and it's like that fucking that sketch on the internet where the guy's just slapping people left and right. That's what Israel is doing. They I'll find that and put it in the show notes, even though it's humorous and not really on point for this. But you don't continue destroying this person and generations of his offspring
and his friends and his family and everyone he's ever known. It's like, again, even if I don't even agree that this is self-defense, but if you believe that self-defense was needed, was okay, after the first, bombs were dropped the first night, that was it, right? They've retaliated with far superior firepower than what Hamas was using against them. I mean, we're talking, again, like handmade shoulder-propelled rockets and sticks and stones compared to a country that has literal nuclear weapons here, and they've been bombarding the Palestinians for days and days and days and days, leveling entire buildings, hundreds and hundreds dead children dead in the streets. I mean, children, ambulances attacked, medics killed. I mean, this is just like, it's brutal, and it's gotten to the point where, they will kill anybody. They're how can you say they're targeting a terrorist organization when they're just murdering civilians left and right in the street?
I mean, it's so convenient. I know I said before, like, that's a huge part of like American media, but the more I'm learning, the more like it's so stupid, because they always say it for the Q people, but I feel kind of like, I am being red pilled. Like, everything is starting to connect so much easier. Like, the United States has been backing up Israel since the beginning, has been providing them funding, has been one of the many countries that are enabling Israel to continue to violate international law and commit war crimes. By the way, like, obviously there have been literal people killed. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that they were using less lethal rounds. When they were storming Al-Aqsa and stuff. But even me, man, I'm always like, I feel like I have to subscribe to the two sides narrative. That's how deeply embedded it is, right. that I don't even feel comfortable saying, like Sean King, he said every single nation in the UN Security Council has called for a ceasefire in Israel except for one single country, and it's the United States. Like, the United States, pretty much just made Israel like their pop-up store. It's textbook imperialism, and it's right in line with what the United States did, in its founding. But we are seeing now, like, we're seeing it in real time. We're seeing people being evicted off their land, and we're seeing it being done with blood. And the worst part is that the world is watching, and they're just standing by. World leaders have been failing every step of the way to condemn the acts of the Israeli military and government. Maybe it helps people if I say that instead of saying Israel as a whole, because they think I'm talking about Jews. Which, once again, if you want to call me an anti-Semite, you are more than welcome to, because I've been speaking out against Nazis since the beginning. I have no worries defending my beliefs. For me, it isn't about religion. It's about
your qualm isn't with children. Jews. Your qualm isn't with Jews. It's with the government and military of Israel. And unfortunately, I want to talk about indoctrination. They basically make every Israeli citizen serve in the military, I think at 18, right? So, everyone is forced into this. So, it's hard to imagine, that here, think that every single person has to serve. Of course you're going to have certain beliefs, right? I mean, that's why so many Israeli citizens support what's happening, because they at a young age they move into the military and they're taught to do this, right? They're taught that the Palestinians are the enemy and that they have to be, controlled and stopped from basically taking over Israel. I think there's a lot of propaganda and fear that's used on their citizens. Whenever Hamas does fire one of their puny little rockets, there's air raid sirens that go out throughout Israel, telling people they're under attack. I mean, it's literally like the Blitzkrieg in World War II. They think that they're gonna be slaughtered, but the the truth of it is.
So once again, propaganda is also attributing to this nationalism.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and the truth of it is, I mean, really, the Palestinians aren't even able to get very far to Israeli territory. So if you're not at the border, you're probably okay. But
yes, didn't you say some of their rockets actually fell on Gaza?
Yeah, they reported that some of the rockets they fired actually fell on Gaza. They don't have the technology or resources for their weapons to really be accurate or long distance. So, you know, it's just it's pretty wild.
And that's actually another thing. I think I was going to mention it before, but I went off on a tangent. But yeah, one of the documentaries that we had watched said that Hamas is like the Israeli government's best friend. Like they pretty much let Hamas get voted into power, so now they have an excuse.
It's their boogeyman.
Yeah, they have this organization they've been calling a terrorist organization since its inception, and they're saying, okay, they voted a terrorist organization in as their government. Everything we do is completely justified now. Right. And you know, it really sucks, man, because I'm just, you know, I know that like there's liberals on my Facebook page, but I'm seeing them like, you know, absolutely defend the acts of the Israeli government by being like, oh, well, Hamas. Oh, well, they're happy Arabs living in Israel. Like, you know, like just,
yeah,
you know, and I replied to him. I was like, oh, there are successful black people in the United States. There's definitely not a race problem, you know, knowing that he's a Black Lives Matter guy. Like,
there you go. Yep. Well, that's a funny thing. You know, there's like, I think I sent you like a funny meme or something. It was like, or an article, a joke article. It was like, you know, a woman with Black Lives Matter in her profile, unsure about genocide of Palestinians, you know, and it's like, hello, like, why can't you connect the dots? You know, like, one oppressed person, you can't tell another oppressed person, you know, like, how can you not see that? It's just wild.
I think it's so useful that I have been there. Like, I've been that guy, you know, and for me to just watch CNN, the leftist news organization in the world,
right.
you know, say Hamas is are terrorists and Israel is fighting back against them. I'm like, okay, that seems pretty cut and dry. And then if I see someone who's speaking out against Israel being called an anti-Semite, I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to be accused of that. You know, this is complicated. We're told that it's about religion. It's about Islam versus Judaism, and it's not. It's not about Islam versus I mean, you know, the Israeli government wants to make it about religion when they storm Al-Aqsa Mosque, you know, but that's, you know, and they seize control of Jerusalem. And by the way, I want to say now that, like, I didn't realize at the time how detrimental it was to the Middle East that Trump acknowledged Jerusalem as the official capital of Israel. I was one of those people who, once again, I was like, well, it's pretty complicated. Let me take a step back. But you know, you just got to weed through that. It's not about religion. This is about human rights violations. And even if you can say, you know, one side is this, the other side is that, the side that is killing more children is always wrong. The side that is separating families is always wrong. That's it. You know, and and honestly, as an atheist, I couldn't care less about what your fucking books say. Like, you know, your religious texts. And I know that sounds callous or whatever, but I'm talking about all of them.
Well, I mean, even if you wanted to go buy that book, right? You know, Jews are supposed to return to this land when the Messiah has returned, and they did not acknowledge Jesus Christ. So even if you want to use religion as the argument, it's not time to return then. I mean, that's their own religion stating that, you know, and it's just, so what, you know, they're going to pick and choose whatever supports the narrative of what they want to do, right? And you know, again, the U.S. is never going to call this out. They're never going to speak out against it because it's what the U.S. does, right? I mean, the U.S. has done the same thing to Afghanistan, to Iraq, you know, to indigenous people of the United States. I mean, this country has been known for committing genocide, to taking out terrorist organization, you know, killing the savages, whatever they want to call it. Right, and you know, whoever gets hurt in the crossfire, it doesn't really matter. And this is, you know, Israel's taking that and they're improving upon it by literally imprisoning the Palestinians in a strip of land in which they cannot escape. And, you know, anytime they want more land, they go in, they take it, and then, you know, if Hamas retaliates, perfect. They can just level entire buildings, they can kill civilians, and bam, they've got themselves even more land. So it's
they can control their media and our media to keep feeding us the same narrative. And honestly, it is so vague. I'm sure if you pause, you could see even just the news anchors sweating as they read the stuff off the, off the teleprompter. But we are, we're continually told like this, just this vague idea of what's happening. And I'm sure that there are so many Americans who don't even know if Israel's an ally with us. Like, they just see the stuff happening. They're like, oh, the Middle East, it's complicated. I don't want to touch it. It seems scary to me. It seems foreign. But because of this, this small sphere, this echo chamber of American media that we have, we'll take anything we can get. And we're going to view all foreign stuff as frightening. I feel scared talking about this stuff. I feel concerned talking about it. And I will say I've crammed a bunch of information into my head the last few days. And I mean, honestly, if you have anything to say, politipopcast@gmail.com, you're more than welcome to reach out. Even if you are a Zionist, go ahead. Like, I honestly, I have nothing to fear. Like I said, you look at the side who's killing the most children, and that's the side that's wrong. That's
right. I know, and we're not sitting here saying Israel doesn't belong, doesn't have rights, that shouldn't exist. We're just sitting here saying there should be, a two-state solution, right? There has to be a way for these people to live simultaneously. They're in this land together, and there has to be a solution in which children are not butchered in the streets. And I don't support Hamas killing Israelis, of course, but you got to imagine if you're in a spot where you're fighting for the literal survival of your peoples.
You can't protest, right?
Right. If you protest, you're sniped. You get sniped by IDF. And it's like, so they are desperate and they're trying to fight. And again, Israel came in and started taking land again, right? They kind of kicked this off. So what kind of response would you expect? I mean, we have American citizens like, let the government come in and take my land, see what happens. Like anyone would want to defend their homes, right? Like anyone would want to defend their homes and their people. So, I think it's really short-sighted to just say, oh, well, you're obviously anti-Semitic because you're supporting Palestinian lives and rights. And not to mention the fact that Israel has violated numerous international law, right? And this is a fact. All right, they've used weapons that have been outlawed internationally. There are
white phosphorus
doctrines
of which they once, and this is years ago, not even recently, they once threw into a baby's crib, a white phosphorus grenade, I believe.
Yep, and not to mention the fact that there is numerous documents, I believe from the UN stating, that children are not to be targeted, medical personnel are not to be targeted, the very people that the IDF will target, will kill to make a statement. You can, there's literal video evidence of this happening, of children being shot in the face. Look at those documentaries we watched, and there's even footage from an IDF soldier where they shoot a child on the Palestinian side of the border, and they're laughing about how he falls over and his leg kicking in the air, and he's not armed; he's just standing there. This is things that happen, and I would hope that anyone of any religious background or nationality or ethnicity would want to see justice, right? Would want to make sure that people are doing the right thing and not harming innocent children and civilians that aren't even fighting back.
I think that's very well said. I want to follow up actually just talking about that quote unquote friend. He's more of an acquaintance on Facebook, and I want to go I'm going to go right-wing conservative AM radio talk host right now.
Whoa.
Okay, and I'm going to say here that liberalism is destroying America, and here's why. So he shares this thing that says you can't call Israelis settlers, and it's anti-Semitic, and here's why. And he has this whole infographic talking about how they have a right to the land, and it's racist to call them settlers, and it's anti-Semitic, and all this other stuff. And I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking maybe I'm not using the right words. I still am on the side of the human rights of the Palestinian peoples who are valid. But maybe I need to use the right words. And then I go into the comments and I see that, I can't believe I'm still doing this character. And then I see that he's talking all about Hamas and talking about how, Israel's justified in doing what they do with their military actions. And then I realized that it's actually not about the words at all, is it? It's about distracting from the matters at hand and justifying war crimes and atrocities. All right? So that's how liberalism is destroying America. Don't be afraid of the liberals calling you something that you ain't. All right? If you hate fucking Nazis, then you hate Nazis. If you believe that all people of all faiths, deserve to, have a place, but not at the expense of others, then by all means, make your voice known. And that's about it.
I mean, I would say, if you're obviously, you're pro-Israel and you're anti-Nazi, look at it like this. You're okay with them, Israel bombing, the Gaza Strip to fight Hamas, right? To target Hamas and civilians getting killed in the middle there. Would you be okay with a white supremacist group being targeted by, United States Army and then bombing an entire town or city to get to them? Like, would you be okay with that? And I think you got to look at it like that and think, well, I wouldn't want innocent people to get killed. Well, yeah, that's what's happening in Palestine. Whether, if you really are against Hamas, fine, whatever. We can't convince you otherwise. But, think about, again, the children that are being killed in the crossfire. It just, it's not right. And I think there just has to come a point where people, the UN has to step in and go, enough's enough. This has to end. And just let the Palestinians be where they are, right? They have very little land left. They have about a city's worth of land. Let's say like the size of, I don't know, Chicago, I heard on a podcast, that about that large of an area. And, Jesus. Just let them live. Just let them live at this point. Stop restricting their food. Stop restricting their water. Let
they would
them
never
be.
do that, though. I mean, it.
They wouldn't because they're afraid that they're going to grow and get more powerful, and then maybe that they'll decide they want to take the land back. And hey, if that happens, then obviously there will be a conflict. But you can't restrict literal food and water from these people. You have to let them be, and hopefully there can be a peaceful solution here.
My theory is I don't think there will be. I don't believe that a two-state solution is possible at this point because, after all of this, how do you live next to that person ever again? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And how do you ever hope that they won't do what they've previously been doing? And I know that I don't necessarily have the solution, but I do think that at the very least, open the borders and let them get the fuck out of there if they need to. You stop fencing these people in. Like once again, the irony of people who have survived and persevered through something as terrible as the Holocaust, creating a literal ghetto for another group of people. It's tragic. It's tragic when people use it as an excuse too. They say, I don't know, like even, once again, Germany is one of the countries who's afraid to say anything because they are ashamed of their Nazi heritage and they don't want to be associated with any sort of anti-Semitism. So they won't speak up or say anything. There's so many people who are just afraid. And why? I know why. I know why we can't hold these people accountable. Like, because once again, Israel's a pop-up for the U.S. at this point. It's a capitalist imperialist nation that gets money and resources from us to maintain a sphere of influence in the.
They're U.S. light.
But yeah, dude, I don't know, like, because what's the other option, right? What if they did open the borders and all the Palestinians left? And obviously there's a refugee crisis. They'd have to go somewhere else in the world. Right. Who's going to take them? All this other stuff. But like at that point, Israel won, didn't they? Like, we've just shown that they're allowed to do whatever they want and get away with it.
I think that's the thing. It's like, just like anyone else would be held accountable, they need to be held accountable, and they can't use, the Jewish faith as a shield. Like that can't be a get out of jail free card for every single action they commit. No one should be allowed to do that, right? No one should be above reproach. We've said that before on this podcast. No one should be above reproach. And genocide is genocide. So, no matter who's committing it. So,
talking about people who, have received reproach from, from multiple sides here and there, I do want to talk about, about a few congresswomen. We've had our criticisms mostly of AOC on this. We really haven't spoken much about Omar.
Rest of the squad.
Yeah, the rest of the squad. But if you know what, I'll throw it in the show notes and sources for this too. There is an entire like 2-hour long version where multiple people are speaking on the floor about different things, but a majority of them are about Israel. Some Congress people being in support of Israel and doing the whole, we condemn violence on both sides and hope there can be, peaceful solution. Not like you said it, but like they say it, you know what I mean? Without acknowledging, once again, the disproportionate use of force. But AOC stepped up and, I told you off mic, I feel like they have her family held hostage because I feel like she wanted to say so much more and couldn't, and was very like, she just said all of the leaders, not Biden specifically, just all the leaders and blah, blah, blah. If we stand for this, we need to step up. But she did call attention also to the children in cages at our border and equivocated the separation of families, to the situation happening in Palestine as well. So, that's a long cry from Biden's cages are better. Ilhan Omar also spoke. I'll include that in the show notes. I only saw like the first 2 minutes of it, but the one that really got me was Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's 10 minutes, and it was heart-wrenching. She is a woman of Palestinian descent, and just hearing her speak, hearing her share letters. There was one woman who told her that when she puts the kids to sleep at night, they all sleep in the same room. So if they die, they can all die together. That's... yeah. And once again, that could be the room of their house in which they've lived in for 40 years, or a few generations of their family have lived there. And, land is always tough with me. I don't believe that anybody has a right to land specifically. I believe that we can borrow this land and use the resources that the earth gives us to live a productive and pleasurable life.
Right.
But we're here for a fraction of that, of the earth's life. Like, what's 100 years even to millions of years. And I don't think any of us have a right to land, but I do think we have a right to live peacefully and to feel safe and provided for. And, just having gone through, I'm currently going through therapy, I've realized that a lot of our insecurities as human beings, they all come from a need to feel safe. And I saw a video this morning of a child who was pulled from underneath the wreckage of his house, and his eyes, he was alive. He survived, Palestinian child. But his eyes were just like, he'll never be a human ever again in his life. And even if he represses that memory, that will always be there in the back of his head, that that he needs to feel safe, and it will dictate every action he takes in his life. Yeah,
well, you're right. Like you said, these people aren't being given the right to live, and that's the problem, right?
All in the name of self-defense.
Right, all in the name of self-defense. So, no matter what's going on in your life, it's okay to be stressed, okay to be scared, but remember, this is happening to people out there where they don't know if they're going to survive the night, they don't know where they're going to live. They don't know where their next meal's coming from, or if they're ever going to see their family again, because, they're under constant attack, and it's just sad, Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of older Palestinians will carry the key to their homes from where they were evicted, years and years ago, and they'll have keys from the 1940s and 1950s, and they carry it as a memory of Christ, where they were taken from.
Wow. This isn't a case of self-defense. You have one country, one state that is a superpower, and another struggling for its existence. And no matter what, one side is so overpowered and is the aggressor. And to quote Ty's favorite character from Batman Begins, Rachel Dawes, when she says, all Falcone needs to succeed is for good people, to do nothing. And so kudos again to the our own elected officials, and I almost threw up in my fucking mouth saying that. Who actually acknowledged this going on, and acknowledged that it is not a two-sided conflict, that it is a one-sided apartheid, occupation, genocide, whatever you'd like to call it. And, I hope that other world leaders, I use that term very loosely, will take note. Anything on your end, Ty?
No, I said what I had to say. I just
I
hope
said what
people
I said. All right.
I said what I said. All right. I just hope people, look in their hearts and think about how they feel about people living and surviving, and stop, just listening to propaganda. So
that's about it. Next week we will be resuming our regularly scheduled content with The Dark Knight, movie that changed my life for 3 months, and then
woo, I'm so excited. Fuck
this
world,
it's
man.
man, it's rough. I don't know. I feel like I've said what I had to say, and hopefully I made it as accessible as possible for those of you out there who, this conflict may be too complicated for you to even want to take a stance on.
Right.
But please understand that we are seeing imperialism and similar fascist tactics that have been so normalized to us because we're at the center of it, but we're seeing it overseas, and something has to be done. I don't know. I did propose some sort of strike, but that would be I don't have the reach for that, folks. If any of you do, think about it. Think about at least a nationwide or a countrywide strike in which, once again, you hit the 1% hard. Just a day of not making them their constant influx of money could hurt them, as we saw with the pandemic. But I'm not gonna try and organize that just now. I do have one review to read, though, Ty.
Oh wow! Okay, what a way to cap this off.
Yes, and I'll go off on a high note here. How about that? So, the title of the review is "Damn Good Stuff." These guys review classic movies and comics in their unique way. They have really good political takes, and I find myself nodding along at almost everything they say. However, it's obvious they're communists, and they need to stop being cowards and say it on the mic. I do not shy away from my newfound communist ideals, but the mainstream still is what it is, and one of us has to be a person, I guess. So until you're ready. I'm not gonna out him. All right. I know we know where Comrade Ty stands.
Oh yeah.
Also, we'll see if there's any way that you can donate or help out, and we'll throw that in the show notes and sources as well.
Right.
But in the meantime, in between time, folks, for the Politipod podcast, I have been Mike Booch,
and I have been Comrade Ty.
And remember, no matter what you're reading, watching, listening to, never stop thinking, never stop learning, and fucking regardless of the shit you're seeing on TV, please find multiple sources. Please, if you truly believe that both sides are at fault, literally learn about both sides. That's all you have to do.
Right.
Because that falls right under what I always say at the end of each episode. Never stop learning. Oh, and always remember to read between the lines.
And scene.
Thank you.